Hello, everybody, and welcome back. It is Monday, December 12th, 2022, and you're listening to episode 153 of the Can I Say Something podcast. I'm your host, Anna Reckless, with a juicy caboose, Damian. Joining me today is...
Derick McDuff.
On today's show, we will be discussing what is and what isn't on the 2022 Sight and Sound Greatest Movies of All Time list. Afterward, we'll be getting to what we've been watching, including She Said, The Fabelmans, Aftersun, and much, much more. Right into the show at canisaysomethingpodcast@gmail.com, at Bicycle on Twitter, subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Google Podcasts, Spotify, rate and review it on Apple Podcasts, tell a friend, family member, or stranger. What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing well. Not too bad. Feeling refreshed and rested. I just got back from a camping trip a couple days ago. It was a nice little escape. So I'm good.
Nice. Very cool. Yeah. I'm feeling cozy over here. Northeast just got hit with 2 to 3 inches, like I was telling you before. Seems like a thick 2 to 3 inches. So I think maybe Mother Nature is compensating for something. I'm not sure what's going on there.
We got hit with 2 to 3 inches of like rainwater. Like all there was so much rain that it was starting to pile up. Probably about at least that much on all the off ramps, and just I was like. Yeah. It was just huge. Like I was getting off, and just huge waves of water were coming off. So yeah, it's crazy weather everywhere, I guess.
Weather everywhere. Speaking of crazy, got a crazy list.
Oh, what a nice transition! Yeah. Wow.
Thank you. Right. Sight and Sound. We were talking about this for a while, maybe like a month before it even came out. Talking about what will be on it, what won't be on it. Will they include any newer movies on it? Will they include female filmmakers? Will they include international artists? Will they include superhero movies? Unfortunately, no superhero movies were included on the list this time, but there wasn't some major shakeups. But we will get to that. Just so people know what we're talking about, Sight and Sound is a list that has been around since 1952. I have an article pulled up from the New York Times. They did a very cool interactive article on there that sort of broke down Sight and Sound, what it is, where it came from. So it started in 1952, and they've been putting together a list, the gold standard list. Everyone calls it that. Roger Ebert on here says it was, quote, by far the most respected of the countless polls of great movies. The only one most serious movie people take seriously. So it started in 52, the first one on the list. The first one that was named number one best movie of all time in 1952 was Bicycle Thieves. Vittorio De Sica's neo-realist drama Bicycle Thieves, which released a mere 4 years before the list started. Following it at number 2 was City Lights, and Gold Rush tied for number 2. So that's interesting. I love City Lights. It's one of my favorite movies. I once saw when I was seeing all of the silent movies from that era. One of my favorite ones from that time. Number 7 was The Passion of Joan of Arc. You had things like Les Millions, a French comedy. And then 10 years later, they upped their respondents. A drastically different set of winners, says the article. Bicycle Thieves still made the cut, as did Sergei Einstein's Battleship Potemkin. But no more lottery tickets or Little Tramps, and the top spot went to a newcomer that would get pretty comfortable as number 1, Citizen Kane, in 1962, which would hold the spot for a half a century. For 50 years, it would stay there, stay at number 1. You had things like Jeanne Rewar's The Rules of the Game, Rules of the Game. Ozu's Tokyo Story would be there for a while. 8.5 would be there for a while. They're saying a Film 101 class would have a lot of the stuff in the 1972 top 10. So you had a lot of Wells's, you had Ingmar Bergman in there. In 72, it says Wells and Ingmar Bergman alone were responsible for more than a third of what the respondents considered the greatest films of all time. And then, in 1982, Alfred Hitchcock finally made his appearance. Horror and suspense were, and still are, largely outsiders in great film discussions, but here we see Vertigo enter at number 7 and creep north until 2012. It had supplanted Citizen Kane in the top spot, generating headlines around the world like Slate's 3 theories for how Vertigo dethroned Kane. Still, every film but one in the top 10 had appeared on at least one previous list. But when this year's Sight and Sound list was unveiled on December 1st, the list featured surprises galore. So before I get there, tell me, what was your reaction to seeing what film became number one in Sight Sound's list of best movies of all time?
I was like, what is this movie? I was like, what is this? I was like, what the fuck? And then when I think it was you who was telling me about it, I was like, I think I remember hearing about that in like a fucking like video essay that I was watching, like one of those lists that
Right.
like one of those top 10 lists. I was just like, oh, okay. Like I barely even know this I barely heard of this
Right.
movie. This is the best movie of all. Like when you told me, I was like, oh, it's saying that it's on the list. And I was like, oh, no, it's number one. All right.
Yeah. So, just for context, it was Jeanne Dielman, Chantal Ackerman's Jeanne Dielman, a very sort of experimental, sort of art house, sort of artsy-fartsy movie from 1975, stars Delphine Seyrig and Jeanne de Courcy. The synopsis is: a lonely, widowed housewife does her daily chores, takes care of her apartment where she lives with her teenage son, and turns the occasional trick to make ends meet. However, something happens that changes her safe routine. So, like I said, I had heard of this. Film Spotting did a blind spotting sort of marathon in 2020 when movies stopped coming out, so they had to find something else to talk about. So they went back into like auteurs of the 70s and international auteurs, which included Chantal Ackerman and included her movie here. It is a 3.5 hours. It is a movie that forces you to sort of sit in her mundaneness, in the mundane routine of her life. And I think sort of what they were talking about on Film Spotting and what the movie is essentially about is about, a woman's role in society, a woman's role in the household, how much you watch her for 3.5 hours doing peeling potatoes, making the bed, cleaning the bathrooms, things like that. So you're sort of forced to sort of sit in her routine for 3.5 hours. About 2 hours into it, you see, or maybe a little less, you sort of see her a little bit frazzled, a little bit upset about something that happened to her. And then you see her routine start to crack and start to fall apart. And you're sort of wondering what happened and what's going to continue to happen. So it's a very interesting movie that sort of forces you to, definitely in our day and age, forces you to sort of sit in her life with her and sort of watch her very subtly and very nuancedly sort of break apart. And I thought it was a very compelling performance, and probably it is worth watching, I would say, for the ending, which I won't spoil here, but I would definitely recommend checking this out if you have if you have a spare 3.5 hours.
Yeah. I mean, sounds pretty fucking boring, but It's one of those movies. I'm like, looking over the list, I was like, there's definitely some amazing films on here, and there's some films that I plan, and some stuff that I really want to defend against the fucking void of just pieces of shit that is film Twitter. But God, this list is fucking pretentious, and this is like the pinnacle of that. Just like, what's the greatest film ever made? Just watching a lady peel potato. I'm like, fucking okay, potatoes, we get it. You went to like, look at fucking goddamn Bong Joon-ho. Bong Joon-ho was one of the voters, and he revealed his ballot, and it had like Mad Max Fury Road and fucking all these incredible films on it. And there's so many places for those films. Like, those films are incredible, and they deserve to be talked about and studied and everything else. But you know what? They're not the only films. Mad Max Fury Road is also a fucking cinematic masterpiece, and that did not make the list, and nothing like it made the list. It's a lot of this indie, foreign, depressing shit, which, as I've said, I love, but I don't need to see all 100 films just be that.
Yeah. There were some additions this year from the recent times, and Bong Joon-ho's Parasite did make the list at 50, correct? Or was it 80? It's somewhere on the list.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. Just looking through, talking about how it sort of changed. So 63 Sight & Sound voters did the voting in 1952. It's given way to more than 1,600 in 2022. And so I think what you're seeing is a lot more women in that in the voting block. You see a lot more international voters in that voting block. So I think that definitely contributed to this new sort of contemporary list and this new sort of very variety laden list, right? You have a lot of more women directors on the list for the first time. You have Denis Villeneuve. This is the first time you have two women directors, Denis Villeneuve, Chantal Akerman, were the first women to ever appear on the list, and they both made it. They made it in 2012. It says. We're joined this year. Sorry, in 2022 there are 7 women on this list. Celine Sciamma with Portrait of Lady on Fire, which I'm sure you were happy to see on there. Correct? Yes. You have Julie Dash, you have Maya Deren, Agnes Varda, Vera Chilvoga, Barbara Loden, and Jane Campion were also on the list. So I think, saying it's a lot of hoity-toity, a lot of auteur, a lot of artisty things on there, but it's also good to see a lot of more representation on the list, correct?
Yeah, that's the thing that I'm really happy about, is that the auteurs and the hoity-toity people of color and women and like LGBTQ people also are represented. So that's good. We're allowing more kinds of hoity-toity films to get representation, which is very nice. Yes. And that's one thing I wanted to talk about is that, I kind of, without realizing that it had dropped, went on to Twitter and just saw all these takes erupting on Twitter that I didn't even at first know what they were. Like, just people so angry that Portrait of a Lady on Fire was 30, and everyone was losing their fucking minds. And like, that is an incredible movie. That is a movie that is better than in my opinion, anything on the list, or most of the stuff that have been on any of these lists. It's a fucking great film, but all of the film bros were upset, and people were upset because the 4 that let me think, like, if I can get them right off the top of my head. The 4 that were on the list from the most recent decade, since 2012, since it was released, were Moonlight, Get Out, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, and Parasite, as you mentioned. Those films are all either about LGBTQ people, people of color, or all of the above, or women.
About class as well, yeah.
Yes. And people were very upset. And there was one take that I saw, somebody was like, recency bias. I'm like, there's 4 films from this decade. How many films from the fucking 70s are on there? Like, that's not... Yeah. You're an idiot. And just, I don't know, just like people were just so mad, and they're like, well, there's not a single one of, how is Chinatown not in here? Fuck Chinatown. That's a bad movie. That is a fucking cynical piece of shit movie that I despise, made by a rapist pedophile, and like, people need to shut the fuck up about. Like, people are almost getting so close to saying the quiet part out loud, being so upset that like women and people of color and diverse, like, people of other sexualities are getting on this list now, and it's not just a collection of fucking white dudes. And so they are definitely, just getting real upset about that, which is just bullshit. And I think that the list is incredibly pretentious, as I said, but like I liked Parasite a lot. I don't know that I would say it's one of the 100 films of all time, but I'm not upset that it's on there.
Ooh.
Yeah,
I think I would. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I loved Parasite as much as most people. I liked it a lot, but it wasn't like as transcendent for me. I'd say probably the same thing about Moonlight. There are movies that especially Moonlight is a movie that I wanted to like a lot more than I did. But especially with Get Out and Portrait of a Lady on Fire, like, those are both stone cold masterpieces. Like, in my book, they are movies that at any time, if somebody's like, hey, I'm gonna put on Get Out, I would be like, yeah, let's fucking watch it. That movie's so goddamn good. And I'm really glad that representation is happening, and all the fucking trolls they're coming out of Twitter to bash these things need to shut up. But also at the same time, I don't want to seem that I'm like aligning myself with the people who are now attacking A.O. Scott because he doesn't have Top Gun on his list. Fucking Elon Musk saying that the New York Times has gone woke because
woke versus woke. What a fucking idiot!
Oh my god, it's just like, I'm like, I feel like I'm trying to be a good middle ground when it comes to films,
right?
And
You're the Hillary Clinton of movie reviewers.
No, I'm not. I'm not gonna. You're not gonna bait me with that. You almost did, but yeah, no. I definitely think there's places for all kinds of films in a list like this. But I will also finish by saying I'm glad that this list, like you mentioned, does constantly revise and update itself, unlike something like the AFI list, which was they had a list in 97, they had a list in 2007, and then that's been it. And some of that stuff is kind of dated. You're like, really, this is still on the 100 greatest movies of all time? Like, maybe in 2007 Sixth Sense, which is a good movie, seemed like it was the 93rd best movie of all time or something, or Yankee Doodle Dandy, like that's still on the list. But this feels much more culturally relevant to film today, and it's also good. And I will say that it is good to have a list like this, so that you can maybe be like, oh wow, this is a movie that I hadn't heard of, and I probably would not have watched the number one film on this list if it wasn't number one on this list, and now I'm going to at least try and make an effort to watch it.
Yeah, good. Yeah, well said. Talk about the pretentiousness of the list. I'm just going through here and seeing what was taken off. We talked about things that were added. Let's talk about things that were taken off. Jean-Luc Godard's, not Jean-Luc Godard's, they say, by contrast, Godard's nemesis, Bergman, saw 3 of his 4 top 100 titles vanish this year. Only one of his movies, Persona, remains. So
only one? Oh, no.
Well, that's what I'm going to say. Like, I've seen some Bergman, and I think if you're talking about pretentiousness in films, I think he is one of the most pretentious filmmakers, and people that enjoy his movies are some of the most pretentious film watchers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just going through the bottom of the list here, seeing if there's anything other of note to talk about here. Those things were taken off. Looking at the list, I just posted that in our Discord. Do you see what I see in terms of like cowardness of just like after 21, everything past 21, above 21 is cemented, is by itself. Almost everything after 21 is like, this is tied for 22nd, tied for 24, tied for 33. It's like, pick one.
Well, I think that has to do with the way the votes rolled out,
I guess, but you have 6 here. You have 6 here tied for 67. You have Tarkovsky's Andrei Rublev, Lajit, The Red Shoes, The Gleaners and I, and Metropolis, all tied for 67. Like, pick one. They're all very different movies.
David, I would pick that's how the votes work. That's the math. That's the math.
Okay, but then don't have like an even number of voters. They could very easily, or just pick one. You have how many? Holy crap! You have like 6 tied for 78th. But doesn't that dilute the importance of the pick? Like if you're saying this is the 78th best movie of all time, but also this one and also that one, just like if you're trying to say to the public, right? We are picking the best, the definitive 100 best movies of all time. How can it be definitive if you have like 7 movies tied for 78th?
Well, I think if you were talking about a movie in the top 5, I would probably agree with you, but I really don't care that there's 6 movies tied for 78. Sure. I wouldn't be like, well, okay. this one should be 79, and this one really should be 77. Like, I mean, they're all. It's at that point, it's like, who cares if one is marginally better than the other or tied?
I suppose, but Parasite's down there. It's like Parasite is 90th, but also Yi is 90th, but also the Earrings Madame D, a very pretentious movie. It's like Parasite. You were saying you didn't like it as much as most people. I think that is the least pretentious movie on here, or one of the least pretentious movies on here. Parasite is, because that thing moves. Like I've watched that like 3 times because it just moves. Like there's so many great scenes. There's so many great scenes of dialogue. There's so many great moments in that movie that I just go back to and want to revisit over and over again. And I don't think you can say that about 2001: A Space Odyssey.
The least pretentious movie on the list is definitely Blade Runner, but or maybe The Apartment actually. But
The Apartment maybe.
Or something like anything Billy Wilder. There's some Billy Wilder on this. Yes. Something Like It Hot is not. I don't think is pretentious at all. But
Spirited Away, My Neighbor Totoro, those are very good movies.
Yeah, Daisies is 28, and that shit is the most pretentious thing I've ever seen in my fucking life. I fucking hate Daisies.
Tarkovsky's down here a couple of times. I see Mirror, I see Andrei Rublev. I watched Stalker a couple of years ago, and that thing just, it's just like 3 dudes in a room talking, and the camera just sitting there. I think, a camera just sitting looking at a person is pretty pretentious. And I know I'm saying this after watching a movie where it's camera sitting silently watching a woman peel potatoes for 3 hours, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, there's like I said, there's room for pretentiousness in movies. I'm fine with that, but I don't want 97 of the top 100 to all feel the same, like they're the same kind of movie. There's room for other genres than just depressing real life shit, which is why I'm really glad that Blade Runner managed to stay on here, because the rest is all pretty much just these intense dramas, it looks like, maybe, yeah, pretty much, honestly. There's I guess, with the Miyazaki's, there is a little bit of fantasy, and I guess Some Like It Hot is a comedy, but that's about it, honestly, looking at this list.
Yeah. Do the Right Thing, it moves pretty quickly. I would say By the Searchers is pretty good. It moves pretty quickly. Godfather, obviously. Godfather 2 dropped out. Did you notice that?
I did, because a lot of people on Twitter were complaining about it. They're like, "How is Portrait of a Lady on Fire better than Godfather 2?" Ah!
I think what we've learned from this conversation is you should probably get off Twitter, just for your own mental health and mental well-being. Yeah. Okay. So any other thoughts before we leave the Sight and Sound 2022 list and wait for the 2032 list?
No, I think it's like I said, a pretty homogenous list. I would just like to see a little more diversity. I am going to probably try and see a lot of these on here. I looked and I think I've seen a third of them almost exactly. I think I've seen 33 of the films. Yeah. So, I do have a ways to go. Probably by the time I finish, though, 2033 will be out, or 2032 will be out.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So, yes, good list, good discussion. Love that. I just love that they put together a list, and just you can never make anybody happy, right? With stuff like that.
Oh no, absolutely not.
No, yeah, exactly. Okay, so moving on, stuff we have seen this week. I'll get us started. I saw the movie She Said, directed by Maria Schrader. This is the movie about the New York Times investigation into the let me forget the guy's name. Harvey Weinstein's decades-long campaign of molestation and abuse and harassment of women in the entertainment industry. The stars Carey Mulligan, Zoe Kazan, Patricia Clarkson, Andre Braugher. I didn't really care for this movie. I think this is very self-congratulatory, very pat itself on the back. I think we're living in a post-Serial world, Serial being the podcast that was about Adnan Syed, which he just got released just recently, which was very interesting. They did a whole podcast about that. So I think, because of that and because of the popularity of investigative journalism like that, I think there is this pull. There's this new way of telling stories and telling investigative stories where I was thinking about this and I'm wondering your opinion on it, which is, Sarah Koenig, whether she wanted to or not, very much became part of that story. And I feel like, unfortunately, going forward, we might be seeing more of that, where the reporter and the journalist become more and more part of the story. And I think you're seeing that here, definitely put on display here, where the two reporters, Megan Twohey and Jodie Cantor, are very much front and center in this movie. I think they did not put, the victimizer, the abuser front and center, which is a good thing. They put the victims more front and center, which is a good thing. But I think there's way too much about Megan Twohey's and Jodie Cantor's life. I think if you look back on some of the movies about journalism, even from the past 10 to 15 years, like Spotlight and The Post and things like that, those movies very much did not put the journalists up front or their lives up front at all, or especially the thing that bothered me the most was, the journalist's feelings about the case itself. This movie very much puts the journalist's feelings on the case up front, which I think was a mistake. So yeah, I wasn't really too high on it. I think Zoe Kazan is a fairly talented actress. I think Carey Mulligan is much more so. And so I don't think she held her weight against the other actors in this. I think they could very much see that. But, that could be also said that that was a point. I think Jodie Jodie Cantor was the sort of fresh face in there. So I think maybe that was to its benefit in some way. But yeah, didn't really care for it that much. Were you looking forward to seeing this?
I do want to see it. It's interesting the way you describe it. It reminds me more and more and more of another very famous journalism film of two journalists going up against an extremely powerful person and exposing corruption, and that's All the President's Men, because that's a movie from the 70s, I believe. That is obviously about Woodward and Bernstein, two real life journalists, and them taking down President Nixon, or discovering the Watergate scandal. And that one, I believe, it did have a lot of their personal stuff in it, so it does sound like it rings a lot of bells, or is very similar. That's obviously was the script for that was it was highly fictionalized, done by my favorite screenwriter of all time, William Goldman. So I don't know how I would feel about She Said, but based on what you were saying, I mean, some of those negatives I might be interested in. Some of the things you're describing as negatives I might be interested in, just because I love All the President's Men, and I also like Spotlight is another journalism film I like a lot, and then The Post obviously is definitely in conversation directly. It assumes you've seen All the President's Men, so I'd have to see She Said and see how it compares. I haven't heard a lot about it, to be honest, other than just the trailer that I've seen a couple times. I have not really heard any critical response or anything from the box office or audiences or anything like that. I know it's still pretty limited release as far as I can tell. Just haven't gotten around to seeing that one yet.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably right. I just think back on, that scene in Spotlight where Mark Ruffalo just goes off like, they knew and they did nothing. That whole scene. So there are parts in those movies that do forefront the journalists' emotional feelings about the case itself. I just feel like in this, it was very much on the nose, and the sort of the screenplay and the dialogue, repeated the mantra and repeated the mission statement over and over again, to the point where it just got repetitive, which they keep saying like, this is about, abuse and systemic misogyny and systemic, harassment in the entertainment industry, and we have to find who's covering it up. And it's like, well, yes, you could have you could have shown that. You could have just shown that in the work, in the things that you're doing. You don't have to physically say it over and over again. So yeah, I agree. Thinking back on it, there are parts of All the President's Men where you see their home life and you see their sort of passion about getting the case and getting the sort of breaking the case and breaking the corruption and things like that. So, there are parts to it. I don't know. Yeah, I would be interested after you see it to see what you thought of it.
I'll have to check that one out. It has been on my list of things to watch for the end of the year, which is I'm in a mad dash this last month to try and see everything.
Yeah, me too, somewhat. I've probably seen less movies in the past 2 weeks or 2 or 3 weeks than I've seen, the past 2 months. But yeah, I'm seeing quite a few still. And speaking of one I've seen recently, The Fabelmans, I saw this week, obviously directed by Steven Spielberg, co-written by Spielberg and Tony Kushner, starring Michelle Williams, stars Gabrielle LaBelle as Sammy, a.k.a. Steven Spielberg, young Steven Spielberg. Paul Dano plays Bert Fabelman. You have Judd Hirsch playing the uncle. You have Seth Rogen playing Benny. We talked about... yeah. We've talked about Steven Spielberg in the past. We've done a top 5 list about our favorite Spielberg movies. We talked about how all about his movies are very, personal. The things that you sort of look at and think about when you think about, growing up as a kid, growing up as a young movie watcher, those things stand out to you because of the ones that you probably saw the most. I saw Jaws over and over and over again, and E.T. and Jurassic Park and all that stuff. And I was thinking about this, and something I'll bring it up again on the Best of the Year show. But this is a movie about the power of movies, and I think people will sort of wrinkle their nose at that. Again, using the P word is a very pretentious sort of idea to put out there, but I think there is something to that, because I think about watching Jaws in my living room when I was like 7 years old, and I can see the living room. I can see the faux wood paneling. 70s 70s interior design was still a thing because people didn't upgrade from the 70s. So you have like this very hokey brown faux wood paneling, a brown shag carpet, had this white faux leather couch. My dad was smoking, Marlboro Reds in this dirty ass yellow chair, this corduroy red chair or yellow chair. It was probably white to begin with, but he smoked so much it turned it yellow. He was smoking in this ceramic bowl that my mom made him in the shape of a baseball glove because he was a huge Red Sox fan. So all of that stuff that I just mentioned, all of that intimate stuff, that specific stuff, it brings you right back to that moment of watching, Jaws over and over and over again. So I think when you talk about the power of movies, that is some of the stuff you're talking about, right?
Yeah, no, it's a powerful film. I think that it definitely, it's very, very nostalgia heavy, and I think we'll get to in the show later about how a lot of these directors are getting to the point where they're getting very much like very nostalgic, and this movie seems like it's like when what goes through Steven Spielberg's mind before he starts directing a movie. Like it's like someone's like, Mr. Spielberg, and they're like, hold on, son, Mr. Spielberg's got to think about his entire life before he directs a movie,
Right.
And this is what goes in his head, because it's very much it's a kind of storybook version of Spielberg's life. It's a fable. Obviously, it's in the title. That's not a coincidence why he uses Fabelmans as the stand-in name for his family name. It's definitely Spielberg taking that victory lap. And of all of these movies that do this, and of anyone deserves a victory lap, it's Spielberg. There's a limit to how much I'm going to enjoy a movie like this, but it is a Spielberg movie. It's still really good, and I think this is probably the best movie that Spielberg has done in a decade. I would say probably almost definitely his best since 2012 when Tintin was the last really, really good Spielberg movie, I think. And I also do hold a soft spot for Warhorse. And then I think Lincoln came out around the same time. But since then he's made some good films, but nothing that I've really loved. But I did enjoy this. I think it's a little bit long, but I really like that kind of like, he's like, this is my life, this is my story. It felt like he's really dealing with some things that he had never been able to talk about or kind of address before, especially while his parents were alive. But at the same time, he's also addressing a lot of things that everyone in the world knows about Steven Spielberg. Like that last scene, which, we could talk about in a sec, is something that I've heard him say in at least 3 different interviews, describe that last scene. So when it happened, I was like, I know what this is. Okay, all right. But then, and then I was like, okay, I get it. The Fabelmans are going to get a divorce because every Steven Spielberg movie is about a kid who's going through a divorce. E.T., Jurassic Park, Minority Report, fucking Catch Me If You Can. They're all about divorce. We get it, Steven Spielberg. Your parents got a divorce. You don't need to spend another 2.5 hours telling me about your parents getting a divorce. But I did kind of like how each of his parents were the kind of left and right side of his brain almost. It felt like where, it's pitched as like, oh, here's the creatives versus the artists versus the scientists or whatever. And Spielberg, the reason why he's the GOAT is because he is so good at both. No one is as technically brilliant as Spielberg. Him doing those effortless one-ers and these amazing shots and things that just revolutionize film and no one can duplicate. And then at the same time, he's also a brilliant artist who is making these, because films are art. They are just these beautiful pieces of art. As much as they are technical marvels, they are both of these things. And to have his mom be the artist and have his dad be the kind of scientist technician who's, making these computers, and how they both influence him and they're at odds with each other, but in him they kind of comes together. I thought that was really well done. There's some stuff in the film that's a little bit clunky for me, like Judd Hirsch is great, but he's just like, ah, yes, kid, I'm your weird uncle. Let me tell you the whole. Here's the thing about the movie. Let me drop the whole premise on you, and you're like,
gotta rip you apart.
I get it. I
rip
get
you
it.
Apart.
But then there's that scene at the end with the bully in the hallway, and I was like, this is some of the best shit that Spielberg's put to film in 30 years.
Wow. I thought that was hokey.
Oh, I'm the complete opposite. I fucking loved that. That was the only time I was really emotionally invested in that. I did not care about any of the Judd Hirsch stuff, or like a lot of the stuff with his sisters felt hollow, but yeah, I loved that last scene where they're by the lockers a whole lot. I thought that was, because I don't know, I'll get into it more if we want to talk about spoilers, but that was a standout moment for me.
I want to go back to a thing you were saying a little while ago about the division of his mother and his father and who they were as people and how they influenced Steven in his work. Inside the Actors Studio, James Lipton's show, this is I think this clip has been going around Twitter for a while, so you might have seen it. He asked, it wasn't really a question, more like an observation, but it was one of the most insightful observations I've ever seen an interviewer ask or present to a person. He said, your father was an engineer, your mother was a musician. How do the aliens communicate in Close Encounters of the Third Kind? And Steven goes, wow, yeah. I didn't realize I wish I realized when I was doing that that's what I meant. But yes, the aliens, if you haven't seen it, the aliens in Close Encounters are, the ship is the machine and they communicate with music. So that was yes, I thought that was a really, really insightful and very profound, observation to make about his movies and how him as a person, right?
Yeah, no, that's pretty spot on. That's very, very insightful.
Yes. So let's get to sort of the end of the movie, which I thought was pretty interesting. So you have him, Sammy, on the, let's say, just Warner Brothers lot. I'm not sure if they ever said what lot it was, but he's there and he wants to meet, he gets the chance to meet John Ford. And so he walks into the office and it's smoke filled and you have David Lynch playing John Ford and he's got this eye patch and he sits down and he lights a cigar and he smokes it, puffs it like 3 or 4 times. And I got to laugh in my theater. And so he says, kid, you want to make movies, huh? And he's like, yes, sir. Yes, sir. And he's like, okay, look at that photo over there. Look at that picture or whatever, the painting. And Sammy goes, yeah, this painting? He's like, yeah. What do you see? He's like, okay, well, there's 2 horses, 2 guys riding horses. No. Where's the horizon? The kid's
no, the horizon.
He's like, it's downstairs, the bottom. He's like, yeah, look at that one over there. Okay, where's the horizon? And he's like, at the top. Yeah, if the horizon's at the top, it's interesting. If the horizon is at the bottom, it's interesting. If the horizon's in the middle, it's boring. That's all you got to remember, kid. And then what happens? Tell us what happened at the end when he's walking out of the office and he's walking down the movie lot. Where is the camera? What does it do?
So little Sammy Fabelman, Steven Spielberg stand-in is walking down this lot, this Warner Brothers lot, and it's kind of a centered shot, and then all of a sudden, just very jerkily, the camera tilts up. And then it's the horizon is
the horizon is at the bottom.
On the
it's
bottom
interesting.
Of the thing. And it's such an interesting shot. Clever way to end it. Yes. That didn't hit for me as I was like, oh, that's funny. That whole scene didn't hit for me nearly as emotionally as what I felt was the real climax of the movie, which was, in the high school.
The high school, that didn't work for me. I just feel like the whole movie is just him. It's like a hyperbole. It's like an exaggeration of his childhood, right? It's a fantasy version of his childhood, and I understand that, but like it just felt so like people like that don't have self-awareness, and him just coming to him being like, I was an asshole to you. Why were you nice to me? Why'd you make me look like a golden god? And he's like, I don't know. I just wanted to. And he's like, he starts crying. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I don't know why the way I am. And blah, 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 blah. It's just, no.
See, I loved that. I honestly thought that was so, because that character I thought was interesting, the bully character, because because he's just kind of like, bullying him to go along with it. He's not an actual horrible anti-Semite like the fucking Oakley's character The guy from Pete's Dragon.
Chad.
Yeah,
his name is
just
Chad,
kind of,
apparently.
Yes, he just kind of just takes the chunk out, and then Spielberg. It worked to me because it's like this is the power of film, and it's like he's like he has been terrible to him, and it's just like he's like why, and it just makes him have this horrible realization. It just kind of like breaks him, and then it breaks Spielberg or breaks Sammy, and it's just I don't know. That just really, it felt like real. That felt the most real to me. It felt like people just being like, wow, like, why is this happening? I don't really understand why this is happening. And Spielberg being like, through Sammy being like, I don't know why this is happening. It felt the most like these are actual human beings in this heightened world that we've spent 2 hours and 15 minutes at that point setting up what they would be like, and not just like, well, here we go, off to Mom gonna buy a monkey. And I know that Spielberg's mom actually did buy a monkey, but
yes,
it really worked for me. That though, I thought, and just a big part of it was both of their performances are so good. Like both of those actors, like they've never of them has really been in anything before, or anything major. I thought they both really killed it, and just it spoke to me about the power of film and just the way that it can be emotionally manipulative. And their relationship I thought was just interesting because it's like he has been horrible to him, but he's also the reason that he has that girlfriend indirectly, and then he's lost the girlfriend, and what does that mean? And he doesn't understand his impulses as an artist. Like he's like, why did he? He's like, maybe it was. I just love where he's like, he can't answer him. He's like, maybe it's because I wanted you to like me. Maybe it's because I wanted to make a good movie. And they don't really give an answer. It's like, both those could be true. Right. Neither of them could be true. It could be some kind of combination, or one of them. It just, and that's the thing of, that about film is that it's going to hit everyone differently. That was the only part of this movie that I really, really loved. And then they just keep going. I was like, you don't have to keep going. Maybe you don't need that whole scene with Paul Dano there at the end. I was like, I'm not getting any new information here. I've already hit the emotional climax. Give me the scene. You can give me the scene with which I was like, okay, Ford's going to be stunt cast. I've heard this story before. Just the weirdest stunt casting they could have gone with. Like, all right, we're going to get another director. Just
right.
Just, Horizon.
But I guess their Horizon. I guess Spielberg early on was a champion of David Lynch. I think he might have funded or might have put a good word in for Lynch early on, right?
Yeah. He's got such a distinct voice that as soon as he opened his mouth, I was like, who is that? It's got to be Stunt Cat. Oh, it's David Lynch. Okay.
Yes. I guess overall, I liked it, didn't love it. Like you said, it was overlong. I think you're right. It was like 10 to 15 minutes too long. I'm not sure if the end needed to be chopped off. I think it could have chopped some in the middle. I think it. I did really like the shooting, them showing how he shot. The war movie he made, that 40-minute war movie he made. That was interesting. How the actor sort of broke down and how he shot that. That was a very interesting moment there. I think it has interesting moments. I just don't think it worked overall as a movie for me.
Yeah, and also I'm like, Spielberg's not really known for his documentaries, and it kind of felt like a lot of very documentary stuff, especially the stuff with his mom and the kind of emotional affair that she was having and how he uncovered that. I thought that was all really interesting and good, but it made me be like, man, I've really got to work on this documentary I've been planning. Like, it really kicked something up in me.
Yeah, that's the other thing I wanted to mention about this, which is that it's interesting that most movies, or a lot of movies, and storytelling in general, usually the more specific you are, the more personal you get, the more universal your message is, the more universal your story is. And this is a rare movie, or a rare story, where it's so specific and so unique and so related just to him. I think it didn't work for me in that way, which is like, he's breaking the constant, he's breaking this rule of like, the more personal your story is, the more universal it is, which seems like this one for me was so personal and so intimate and so his own story that it just didn't quite connect with me.
Yeah, that's why I don't like a lot of these kind of films. Like I talked last year about when Belfast was, like, people thought it might win Best Picture. I was like, I really hope it doesn't, because like I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I agree with that. The more personal, the more universal it is. I think the more I mean, personal things can be very good and very powerful, but I don't think that they're necessarily always universal. Like this clearly wasn't.
Right.
A lot of these very, very personal films that these filmmakers are making, like, I can't relate to being a kid in Ireland in the 60s who likes Thor. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, you not in Ireland, but like, with Everything Everywhere at Once, it's, you could just see it as, you're not a small Asian girl, but I had a interesting, similar relationship with my mother, and she's taking care of my grandfather right now, the way they are. So there are things you can sort of pick out and be like, okay, I'm not that ethnicity, but I do have that relationship with my parents. So that's the thing, you can sort of look at a movie like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say probably the same thing with like Turning Red. I'm not an Asian girl in Canada, but it's also very specifically towards me because I was in middle school in 2002 with a very overbearing mother. So I get that a lot. Like Turning Red feels like one of the very first millennial movies to tap into that specific kind of nostalgia.
Yes, exactly. Speaking of tapping into nostalgia, Aftersun is a movie I saw a couple days ago. Still, really not really reeling from it, but just sort of processing it. This is a movie directed by Charlotte Wells. Stars Paul Mescal and Frankie Corio. This is a movie that came out of Sundance and came out of Cannes with people saying, emotionally crushed them, emotionally wrecked them, emotionally destroyed them. So I was going into that expecting that to happen to me, and it did a little bit. I think part of it is just like I'm seeing a lot of these movies with my mom because she's bringing me around. She wants to see all these movies, so I'm watching a movie with my mom. Can't get emotional with your mother. Can't let that happen. So it's a movie about a girl who's like 11, going on vacation, one of the last vacations with her dad before going off to school or high school or going back to live with her mother or whatever the situation is. And it's very much like we were saying with the Fabelmans. Fabelmans felt like a home movie that he made. This very much literally feels that way because she is making these little snapshots, these little vignettes with a video, like a 8-track video recorder throughout the movie. Very, very good performances. One of the best child performances I've seen this year from Frankie Corio. I wrote on Letterboxd about this, which is it's a movie that we see movies about 6-7-year-olds. We see movies about teenagers. We see movies about kids in very specific time in their life. I think 8th grade sort of touched on a little bit of this. She's a little bit older than the character Sophie is in this movie. But that time in your life when you're like 10 or 11 and you're hanging out with your dad and he's still embarrassing you, but you're still just enough of a kid so that when the world becomes too scary or too weird or too whatever, you still want to run back to that person for protection. And this very much gets at that. And so you're still at that point where you're looking around and you're like, wow, that 14-year-old's got a body like that. Well, is my body can be like that? So it's very, very interesting from that perspective to see, that age and that sort of experience put on film like this. So I very much enjoyed it.
Okay, how did you watch this?
This is playing in a very what is it called? Co-op, very independent theater here in Williamstown.
Okay, so
it's about 40 minutes. Yeah, very small, like independent theater near where I live. So thankfully, I was able to see this. Yeah, vast majority of the movies I'm having to go to like Albany and Williamstown and smaller towns around me because the theater that I walk to isn't showing these. But yeah, hopefully it'll play somewhere near you, or it'll probably come to VOD. I can very much see this movie come to VOD very soon. So hopefully you'll be able to catch it there.
Okay, all right, yeah, I'll have to watch it once it's available. Hopefully.
Yeah. Let's get to some stuff you've been watching. Shout out to The Menu this week, which is another one I'm very excited to see. Tell me about this movie.
Yeah, this movie, it's one of going into it, I was like, this is either going to be really dumb and bad or like phenomenal. I didn't think this was going to fall anywhere in between, and thankfully, I thought this movie was absolutely phenomenal. Just really great satire, just dark comedy, just kind of the whole eat the rich kind of mentality to it, just corruption, or just kind of just saying all these really big things about just corporations and capitalism and its effect on art and the way it just kind of destroys your soul and you're not even creating art for you anymore. And you are just kind of destroyed by that. And it's also, aside from all of the political stuff, it's just a great fucking thriller. It's just a really smart, interesting thriller that's done in a way that is not like anything I've seen before. I think it's really smartly structured, where each act kind of begins with a menu, like, or like each act is almost like a different course, and just the way that it kind of uses the title cards as the kind of names of the courses. Anya Taylor-Joy and Nicholas Hoult are both phenomenal, as is Ralph Fiennes, as is the rest of the cast. Just, I love a good satire, and this one did not disappoint in any way. It's probably going to be on my list of favorite movies of the year, pretty high up. I really did enjoy this. It's really good also to see a kind of mid-budget film like this. A24 is really the only game in town, I believe this is an A24 film, that is making these movies that aren't like the two ends of the spectrum that we were talking about, where they're the little pretentious darlings made for $40,000, or the big superhero movies for the $100,000. It's nice to see a movie with some movie stars and good character actors that looks impressive, but isn't a humongous superhero thing with towns exploding, that is just set in one location and is really smartly done. I liked it a whole lot.
Nice. I believe the menu is from Searchlight Pictures.
Searchlight, okay.
A24,
Searchlight, which
A24
is,
of the 90s.
Yeah, so there we go, because Disney's behind it. There we go. Disney's little indie arm.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe A24's movies from this year are The Whale. I believe they distributed Aftersun, I believe.
Yeah, they did. They've done Bodies, and then Everything Everywhere All at Once, of course. So they've had a few bangers this year for sure.
Yes. Let's see what else you've been watching. You checked out The Policeman,
My Policeman.
My Policeman. The other Don't Worry Darling, the other movie that Mr. Harry Styles is in. Was there any darlings worrying in this movie?
Lots of darlings worrying. As to kind of steal a review slightly that I saw off Letterboxd, this feels like Girl Boss Gatekeep Gaslight the movie, which each of one of its three leads being one of those three parts. This is a movie that I think it's I was kind of wary going in, because it's based on a book that is popular because it got famous on TikTok, and Harry Styles liked the book a lot, and kind of, I guess, campaigned to get it made and for him to star in the lead role. And for anyone who's not familiar, it's set on this trio of characters who are kind of all romantically entwined, or in a love triangle, I guess is the best way to put it. And it's goes back and forth between their lives in the 60s and then 30 years later in the 90s after the fallout of this. And it's kind of rough, because it is really depressing through most of it. Does have some bittersweet stuff, but it was a lot better than I expected. I think Styles is fine in it, but everyone else is really phenomenal. The guy that plays the older version of Harry Styles, let me look up his name real fast, because I think he is phenomenal in the movie. But like, everyone is giving these really heartfelt, good performances. It's saying a lot of things about just I'll spoil one moment in it that was really just heartbreaking. It's because it is about this guy who is a policeman played by Harry Styles, and him being a closeted gay man in the 60s, and then him he sees this couple in the 90s that are just out in the open and holding hands and kissing, and he just breaks down and starts crying. And it's just because he has this mix of emotions where he's happy that obviously that the world is that way, but that he's been he's had to hide who he is for so long, and felt like he couldn't reveal that part of himself to the world, and if he did, his life would be ruined. So he's kind of exiled himself to be unhappy in this this loveless marriage, at least from his side, and he just sees that the world is different now and people could just have all these opportunities, and he just kind of breaks in the most heartbreaking way, seeing this objectively good thing that he wishes he could have had. So yeah, Rupert Everett, by the way, is the guy who plays that, and he's the one in that scene. No, sorry, not Rupert Everett. He plays the other older character. It is Linus Roach. Linus Roach. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, who, if people aren't familiar with him, things that he's been in, he was the English king in Vikings, and he's very, very good in that. He's also Thomas Wayne in Batman Begins, and he looks absolutely, if you look at those two pictures you can see it, but one he's doing an American accent, he looks a lot younger, and then in Vikings he's doing his British accent, he's older, and he's a big beard. So he's a very, very talented actor. He's also in Mandy and a few other things. But nice. He is really, really good in this movie. So it wasn't like, it's not going to be one of my top movies of the year, but it surprised me with how much I enjoyed it.
Nice. I'll definitely check that out. Tell me about Disenchanted. This is a long-awaited sequel to the Enchanted film.
Yes.
With Amy Adams and McDreamy, Patrick Dempsey. So yes. Tell me about the sequel.
Yes. Yeah. I like a sequel. This is a movie that finally we got after, very long. It's by the way, kind of amazing that this movie's happening. Amy Adams is 48 and she still looks incredible. So like, good for her, whatever she's doing. Like,
right.
Great, because I'm like, she looks not that different from 2007, which is saying something. But this movie's bad. This movie's really bad. I was very excited for it. I became a little bit trepidatious going in, and it just is not interesting. It's just, there's a song or two that's good, but it's very muddled. The first Enchanted is so great and so brilliant because it is taking these tropes that we all know from the Disney movies and really turning them on their head in a fun way and being like, what if a Disney princess came into the real world and what would that be? And let's have her sing songs and stuff like that and fall in love with this jaded New York guy, and there's a really good love story in it. And this one, there's none of that interesting comedy. It's just like, the fairy tale world is in the real world. And there's nothing subversive or interesting happening or being said. And I know it's not just me and my fucking jaded film self, because I asked my mom, who, she's not the biggest, she's not going to read Sid Lumet's book, I'll just put it that way. And I was like, what did you think? And she didn't like it either. So I don't think anybody really is enjoying this movie. There's some good performances. It's just pretty bland and uninteresting though. And yeah, it's there's that happens a lot with Lego sequels where you're waiting so long for this thing, and then when it comes out, and they just can't recapture the magic. No pun intended there, or joke intended there. This was a big letdown for me.
Yeah, this is the second one from this year, the Lego sequel with magic, that I've heard not great things about. Do you know the other one I'm talking about?
Hocus Pocus was fine. Hocus Pocus was 1,000 times better than this. Hocus Pocus 2 was 1,000 times better than this. Yeah. At least that was something.
Okay.
This was nothing.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Also catching up with Cobra Kai season 5. Man, what are they? Well, so the original theory behind this, right? It was like a retelling of the Karate Kid story from the bully's point of view, right? That the bully was the victim in
Not
all
a
of that, right?
Well, yeah, kind of like, it's kind of like the Barney people who watched How I Met Your Mother. Barney Stinson is like the real hero of those movies. He was the Billy Zabka. Johnny Lawrence was the Karate Kid. And it is kind of like, a sequel set, 40 years later when these guys are middle-aged and about their kids and what's gone on with their lives. And it's like, yeah, if you look at things from a certain point of view, like maybe he was, because he's like, yeah, he ruined my life. He stole my girlfriend. He kicked me in the face illegally in that tournament. That shouldn't have been a point. And that stuff is fun with season 1, but it really just is a interesting mix of almost like soap opera-esque drama, but done in a really well done way, and just a really good action martial arts show. And it's just really, you just care a lot about the characters, and just there's some great fight scenes and drama, and it really cares about the legacy of the franchise in a way that is kind of stunning to me, where the last 2 seasons, the main antagonist has been the antagonist from Karate Kid 3, a movie which no one in the entire world likes, but they still are like, yeah, we're bringing back people. We're just bringing back all of the legacy of all of these things. And you're like, yeah, like this guy wasn't, like the Karate Kid 3 wasn't great, but there was still these really good nuggets, and they're just like, yeah, let's bring everybody back. Let's have Terry Silver come back and be the being bad. Let's have Mike Barnes, and then Chosen, the bad guy from Karate Kid 2. The kid is just, he comes back, and he's just so good, and it's a lot of fun. Season 5, I just binged through it really quickly. It was kind of my background / chill out show that I was watching this last week, and I absolutely loved it. I cannot wait, because there's only one place for them to go in this when they haven't announced the last season yet, but I'm sure they're going to do one more season or maybe 2. And there's only one Karate Kid film left to go, and that is the next Karate Kid. They gotta bring in Hilary Swank. That's how it's gotta end. That's the only person left, is to bring in the cast from next Karate Kid. And I'm sure Hilary Swank would be down. Like, why wouldn't she? But yeah, these they're a lot of fun. I went in very skeptical, just kind of like, yeah, whatever, I'll watch it in the background. The season 1 and 2 are, when it was on YouTube, are a little bit slower. But man, once Netflix takes over, it becomes a barrel of monkeys, this show.
Nice. I've heard William Zabka on a bunch of different podcasts. I think he was on Bill Simmons' show a couple of times. I think he was on WTF a couple of times. Very, very cool guy. Very much, aware of what, his reputation in movies is, and just very much takes that stuff in stride. So very cool. Very cool show.
Yeah. And pretty much like the whole cast seems to be like that. It's very, very tongue in cheek. Very much like, we know this is what we are known for, these roles that we played when we were kids, and we're still playing them now that we're in our 40s. But you know what? This is fun. We're having a good time with it.
Very cool. And then speaking of another good time, we watched Bullet Train this week, which I think it references as being like smoking aces on a train. Did you agree with that assessment?
That's fun. Yeah, because I saw your Letterboxd review last night, because that's exactly, like, I was watching it, and I was just thinking, this is Bullet Train. Like, this is, or I was like, this is Smoking Aces, which is, like, I was like, the way that it's like, oh, all the assassins are here, and there's some kind of big thing behind it, and it's like they're all getting introduced, and they're all kind of like, it's a little more height of a heightened reality than Smoking Aces, and it's much more stylistic with the way, like, the character introductions are done, like Suicide Squad-esque style. But yeah, I mean, I do love Smoking Aces, and that's, as I was watching it, all I was thinking of was, this is very, very Smoking Aces. It doesn't hit the same highs that Smoking Aces hit for me, which is, I think, I think is a very, very underrated film. But this is fun. This is a lot of fun. I went in being like, I'm a little bit skeptical. I was like, hopefully it's a fun time. And it really was. I think it did some really good stuff. Brad Pitt is just having a ball on this. It's good to see just a good action film that is, I mean, it's based on a book, but it's not really based on any widely known IP. I thought, it's directed by David Leitch, who did Deadpool 2, and just like Brad Pitt having a very fun cameo in Deadpool 2. Ryan Reynolds has a nice little cameo in this. I thought that was a nice little touch, nice little bit of symmetry between actor, director, and another actor. It's a little bit sloppy and a little bit messy. Things don't always, it's just like, well, this guy's here. It's all because I've had luck, but there's some really fun stuff. Brian Tyree Henry and Aaron Tyler Johnson in particular are really good as the kind of like quarreling brother assassins. Michael Shannon is ridiculous as always. He's incredible and terrifying. This is a lot of fun. This is, it dropped on net. I've been meaning to watch it for a while, and I was like thinking about trying to rent it or something, but I was like, I don't really want to pay for it. And then right when I was thinking that, it just dropped on Netflix. So I was like, all right, well, now I have to watch it. I feel like it's the most watch it on Netflix movie of all time, to be honest.
Yes, exactly. A lot more fun than The Gray Man, the other action movie from this year on Netflix. A lot more fun, a lot more inventive action, a lot better shot action. Thought it was shot very well. I thought Brad Pitt did some incredible. He probably did a lot of that stunts himself, which are always helpful in sort of keeping you in the movie.
Yeah,
Very close
no,
set
definitely.
pieces there. Just some ridiculous set pieces though of like. One of the guys, what's his name? Aaron Taylor Johnson gets thrown off the train, and then he's on the back of it and standing on the back of a bullet train, going 300 miles an hour, and he's just standing in the back of it, just like breaking the window with his bare hand. I'm just like, okay, that's too far. You couldn't put a gun on him, couldn't put like a fucking some kind of weapon on him, so he doesn't have to break the back of the window with his bare hand. Come on,
just
now.
like everyone getting shot and they're all fine, and I really did not buy that. Brian Tyree Henry would just like throw himself off the train like that. I was like, that is
right.
No way that character would do that. But it still had that little mid-credit scene where he came back. I thought was pretty brilliant. So there's a lot of good stuff in this, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. But we're getting to the end of the show here. Let me just ask you, we've seen a few different, we were talking about this with the Fabelmans, a bunch of different filmmakers' personal films this year. Apollo 10.5, Richard Linklater's movie, Armageddon Time by James Gray, Bardo, which I have yet to see, by Iñárritu, Fabelmans. We have The Eternal Daughter. We have Junior, Robert Downey Jr.'s documentary on Netflix, which I believe is on there now. We still include Belfast from last year. Is there one of the movies that stand out to you as better than some of the other ones? Is it just, and also, isn't it weird that like right now we're getting so many of these like filmmakers looking inward, very introspective movies? Do you think it had to do with the pandemic, or do you think it has more to do with them sort of getting to that age where they're looking back on their life?
I think it's both of those things, and I think it's also that, the kind of auteur-driven films are dying out, and these guys are like, well, I need to tell my story now. I need to tell, and it's very self-serving, I think, of just being like, well, all these all these character studies and the auteur-driven kind of like pictures are just kind of getting passed over for more kind of the franchise films, which is, some things are good about it. I'm not the biggest fan of that kind of like just like, let's just give whatever guy a blank check and let him do whatever he wants for the rest of time, and he's a genius, and who cares about who the screenwriter was because the director was great. I'm not the biggest fan of the auteur theory, but also I think that the way that franchise films were just kind of dominating everything right now is a little not great. And I think that this is maybe just these guys being like, this is my last chance to tell my great story because I'm a great auteur, and here it is. As far as do any of these stand out, Fabelmans definitely is, I think, of the ones I've seen, because I haven't gotten a chance to see Bardo yet, or Armageddon Time, or Eternal Daughter for that matter. I'm not going to watch probably Apollo 10. I might watch Apollo 10.5. I don't like Richard Linklater, though. I have no interest in his, like, really? Here's my thing, and I didn't enjoy Belfast very much. So Fabelmans, I think, would be head and shoulders above any of these.
Have you not seen any of the Before trilogy?
I do like the Before trilogy. I will say that those are the Linklater movies that I do like a lot. He's hit or miss for me. Some of his movies I really don't like. The four movies though, especially Sunrise, I think Sunrise is a masterpiece. But some of his movies I really do not give a fuck about.
Fair enough. Let's see. So, getting to the end of the show here, end of the year, one of the last podcasts of the year. We have one more to go before the best of the year podcast. How solidified is your list? We're probably going to do. So the problem is, listen, got a problem here. Where you and I see a shit ton of movies, and Dianne and Andy, who I want on the show, haven't seen shit. They don't like making lists. They're curmudgeons. They're troglodytes. They're Philistines. Blah blah blah. We know this. So trying to figure out the format for the show, and what I want to do is have at least a solidified list for posterity's sake, right? So I would like to have top 5 list, top 5 movies, maybe top 5 shows, just so we can sort of compare and contrast at the end of the year. How solidified is your top 5 list of movies, maybe top 10 list of movies for 2022?
So I think my top 5 is pretty set in concrete. I think my top 10 though, like that 5 through 10, is much less so, because there's a lot of stuff I have yet to see because it has not been released, or I just haven't gotten a chance to see it yet. So I do think that my top 5, I don't see them moving because I really think those are all great films, but there's a lot of wiggle room with the rest of them. It's just been such a good year in general for film that is the tough part, deciding what would and what wouldn't make the list of a solid top 5. I am glad that I am, and I'll just give myself a little bit of a shameless plug here. Me and my friends Alan and Ariel, who do my other podcast, Underrated, we also have a Patreon, and we're gonna do our top 10 of the year film wise on that. So I will have at least and I am trying to make sure that they do have come at me with a solid top 10 list, because
yes,
it's the same. It's a little bit of the same problem, but they do, I think, see more films than your buddies. I will have at least that document. So hopefully some people will be able to listen to that on Patreon, because I think we're doing more of a loose kind of thing on this show.
Yeah, we are going to do going from, we're going to have a loose general, here's some of the good stuff, and then we're going to transition to the better stuff and the best stuff at the end there. So that's basically what we're going to do with that. So one more thing before we get to the Letterboxd assignments and the Letterboxd assignments from last week. Pinocchio is a movie coming out. They had 2 Pinocchios this year. We had one with Tom Hanks playing Geppetto. Then we have a Guillermo del Toro's darker version of Pinocchio. I heard a great joke about how Pinocchio is he's a wooden boy who wants to become a real boy, right? And every iteration that we've seen over the past however many years that Pinocchio has been a thing, he's always been a fake boy trying to become a real boy, never a fake girl trying to become a real girl, or a fake boy trying to become a real girl. And I think it's because of internal mahogany.
Oh my God. Get the fuck out of here with that shit.
Moving on, Letterboxd assignments. We were assigned this movie 2 weeks ago. My assignment was Amelie, movie from 2001, obviously starring Audrey Tautou as the titular Amelie. We have Matthew Kassovitz, who was in one of my favorite TV shows from the past few years, The Les Bureaux. This was directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet. I'm not sure of anything else he's done, but I really enjoyed it. It has a very... I would not be surprised if somebody like Wes Anderson was inspired by these sort of camera movements and the compositions and sort of that sort of stuff from this movie. He obviously started before this movie came out in the mid 90s, but I feel like his sort of very specific style of camera movement and sort of symmetry in the composition of his shots was very much inspired by a movie like this. So it's very, very cool. Very, very glad I finally caught up with this. I believe it's on one of those lists that you should see before you die. So finally saw that one. Then your assignment was Chicago. What'd you think of the musical?
I think you're supposed to call it Chicago, because that's how every fucking word is sung in this movie.
Okay.
It is very much a very Broadway-esque musical, not like an old school MGM or like a Disney kind of or even like a La La Land kind of musical. It's very much like, wow, this was clearly made for the stage. And finding out also that this was something where it was adapted from a 75 play, or a 75 musical, which was based on an earlier play, which it itself had been adapted into 2 films. And it does feel like we have a kind of a bare bones plot, and here we're just gonna insert song, and I didn't love it. I really did not. I guess it was. I was talking about how the satire earlier in the menu was really well done. I didn't think that the satire worked for me at all here. It felt very just broad theater, just kind of playing to the cheap seats the whole time, and some of the songs, like there was this fucking song with Richard Gere where he's like a puppeteer that I was just like interminable. I was like, this shit needs, like, it's never ending, and it was like the longest 2-hour movie I've ever seen in my life. It felt like I really did not have. I was so bored watching this movie. And the fact that it won Best Picture in 2002, which was a phenomenal film year, is kind of insane to me. It's also a huge disappointment to me that this is the only musical to win Best Picture since the 60s, which is wild because we've had so many great musicals that have come out since then that are so much better than this. It was not what I was expecting at all. I was not expecting it starts with like Renee Zellweger like murdering a guy in cold blood, and you're like, oh
nice.
And that's what the whole movie's about, is like her being in jail, and then they sing a song about how it's kind of cool to kill a guy if they chews gum an annoying way, and I'm like, what? And so it's an interesting film. I would really like to go back and watch the Ginger Rogers 40s version, or even the silent film version that were based on the play that was not the musical, to see if I would like those any better, because I think there is some interesting stuff in here. I didn't love the ending either. I think there is, because it is very much about like the movie's moral is about fame and just the way that people have these cycles where we get attached to someone, in this case like a prisoner who is clearly a bad person, but they kind of become this person we all rally around, and then we move on to the next thing, and it kind of makes that a half measure at the end of the movie. It kind of is saying something about that, but then it just goes back and it's like, but no, it's okay, they're famous. Did you end up watching this? Because I know you said you were thinking about watching it.
Thinking about it, unfortunately could not boot it up in time. Yes, no. I need to watch it because it's one of the, I think, 1 or 2 movies I haven't seen from the Best Pictures winners of the 2000s. I have to see this. I have to see The Crash, and I have to see the 2009 Slumdog Millionaire. So there's those 3. The last ones I have to see from the 2000s Best Picture winners, which are probably lugubrious and probably not great as much as this one is.
Like Slumdog, I think this movie is just kind of fine. Like, I like Slumdog better than this one, but it seems like one of those movies that wins Best Picture and then everyone just kind of forgets is a thing.
Yes, definitely.
I think that the Oscars are very, very notorious for that. Just kind of really just not being very, just being very short-sighted, and I think this is just another example of like nominating movies that have absolutely zero cultural impact 2-3 years later, and this is another one of those.
Yes, Avatar, we'll see about the cultural impact of that first movie, see if people come back into theaters. I was going to get a ticket for the 30 FPS. Was it 30? Yeah, I think 30 FPS version at my local theater, and it was already packed, so I think, another Cameron winner. You can't ever count that guy out. Never go against Cameron is the rule.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just seeing the regular version. I've got a ticket because my person who was seeing what they don't want to see it in 3D, and I was like, yeah, cool. I would like to see this in IMAX and stuff like that, and all that. But also, I don't care about Avatar, so if I just see it on a regular screen, I'm sure it'll still look good. I'm not gonna go to get in like the horrible seats at the front just so that I could I'm like, if I'm seeing that's going to defeat the purpose of, like, if I'm in a really bad seat where I can't see anything, it's going to defeat the purpose of seeing it on a better, bigger screen. So I might as well just see a normal version. Yep. Like a Philistine,
Exactly. All right, so let's get our assignments for 2 weeks from now. Let me refresh because I had a thing on there that I watched already. So I'm going to go to my Letterboxd watch list. I'm going to go down to sort by shuffle. Going to watch the first thing that pops up, which is a horror movie, a pretentious horror movie, I think, from 1966 called from 1978 called The Eyes of Laura Mars, directed by Irvin Kershner, which his name sounds familiar for some reason.
He did Empire Strikes Back.
Oh, yes. Okay, yes. This stars Faye Dunaway, Tommy Lee Jones, Brad Dourif. Love Brad Dourif. Loved him in in Exorcist 3. It was fantastic in that. Yeah, a lot of cool people in this. All right, so I'll be checking this one out for next time. Synopsis is: a famous fashion photographer develops a disturbing ability to see through the eyes of a serial killer. Nice. Very young Tommy Lee Jones, apparently. Cool. I'll be checking that one out for next time. Derick, go ahead and go to your watch list and hit shuffle. Tell me what you found.
All right, I'm very excited about the one I just got. I am
go ahead.
Very stoked for this. It is the follow-up for both the writer and director of one of my favorite films of all time. Speaking of another 2002 film, I got two in a row here. Another one that maybe people think should have beaten it at the Oscars. So it's the follow-up to Being John Malkovich for both Spike Jonze and as the director and Charlie Kaufman as the writer, and that is Adaptation. The kind of very metatextual, bizarre film. So I am excited to see this because, like I said, Being John Malkovich, one of my absolute favorite films of all time. So I'm excited to see these two work together again because they really bring out the best in each other. So yeah, this will be good. This is a film I've wanted to watch for a very long time. I'm glad that I now am forcing myself to do it.
Yes. I love that combination of writer and director. I loved Adaptation. I loved Cinedosh, New York. I loved Anomalisa. I loved what was the one he did a couple of years ago now?
Kaufman?
Not the end of the world.
Yeah. I'm thinking of Ending Things.
And Think of Ending Things. Yeah, I like that one. Yeah, so
that's a good movie.
I'm jealous. I'm jealous that you got that one. I might check that out as well because it's been a while since I've seen that one.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of Kaufman, one of my all-time favorite films is also Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. It's a fucking amazing film.
Amazing, absolutely. Yep. All right, so let's do some plugs. Plug in the Medium blog. I am trying my best to get my ass down to write some stuff down, some best of lists, best of podcasts, best of audiobooks. I listened to some very good ones in the past week, so I'll be doing that. When I was watching the thing that I forgot to mention about trying to watch Jeanne Dielman, I turned off the computer, turned off my phone, lasted about an hour and a half. I was like, I can't watch this woman peel potatoes anymore. I have to do something else. So, just gotta strap down. You gotta gird my loins to get that done. So go to Letterboxd, B for Benedetta on there, Film SES on YouTube. Go to anchor.com to post a podcast and go back to all of my podcasts for the year. I Fanboy at the beginning of the year, had Lena Wilson on there, had Cinematheque on there, and I had author B.R. Yeager talking about his book, Negative Space, one of the favorite books I've listened to this year. Derick, what did you got to plug?
So I will plug, as I kind of hinted at before, my podcast Underrated. It's a film podcast where we review films that are underrated, and that is available on all of the podcast apps. So however you are listening to this, you can go ahead and listen to Underrated. And then we also have a Patreon. Just look up patreon.com/undercastcompany. We do a couple other podcasts as well. This Underrated comes out on the same day every other Monday as this podcast does. So for Christmas, we decided to talk about a film and debate whether or not it was a Christmas film or not, and that was The Green Knight, and had a lot of really interesting discussions about the film and then what it means to be a Christmas film and if that's its own genre and what does that genre entail if it is one. So that was a lot of fun, and that's going to be our 99th episode, which means we're going to be hitting episode 100 2 weeks from now. We're going to be talking about Stardust, one of my all-time favorite films. We're going to be doing that's going to be on Boxing Day, the day after Christmas, December 26th. We're going to be doing a watch along for that in our Discord. So if you want to watch Stardust with us virtually, we're going to be doing that. And hopefully it's going to be a lot of fun.
Nice, very cool. Yeah, check all that stuff out. For Can I Say Something? I've been Damian.
And I've been Derick.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye.